Hi, everyone. For this week's question and answer series, we have a video about what to do when you don't find anything. And this is a common question in the Research Like a Pro with Research Like a Pro study group. And it usually does come up every time. Often we'll have a project or someone in the study group will have a project or multiple people will where they're a little bit dissatisfied with the findings or they don't find anything relevant. And so the question comes up, how do I write about this? What should I put in my report since I didn't really find anything? So I'm going to talk about that, how to write about negative findings first, and then how to modify your research plan if you want to continue researching. And, at this point in the study group where we've been writing the report, it might be a little bit past the point of revising the research plan to find more information, but it is good to think about this for the future. So, how to write about negative findings. If you didn't find anything that was relevant to your research subject, then what you can do is focus on writing the starting point information in more detail. And of course, you made a detailed timeline with all of the starting point about your research subject. And so you can consider new research ideas as you write this up. And you may have already written some of it for your research plan or created a list of known facts. So you can really expand that and spend more time writing this starting point section. And often, as you do that, you'll think of more things that you could have done in your research plan. So you can add that to the end for future research. Now, when you get to the findings section where you found nothing, you can discuss more about each source and why you chose to search it and what evidence you hoped to find within it, and then discuss how you did not find that. Maybe include how you performed the search. Did you do a page by page? Did you browse only? Did you do a database search? What search terms did you use? Those kinds of things. And then when you talk about the fact that you didn't find what you were looking for, maybe write about the reasons why you may not have found anything and any ideas for additional things to look for. So maybe you didn't find the person's will, and that could be because they didn't have any property. Maybe there were just only debts. And so the person didn't have a will, or maybe they moved right before death. And so maybe you're looking in the wrong location. Just consider all the different reasons why you may not have found what you were looking for there. Now, sometimes it seems sad or disappointing if we don't find anything in our research, especially if we were carefully making a research plan and using our locality guide to find records that seem relevant. But we can always think of things in a positive light. And so, not finding what you were looking for can still be good if you eliminated possible father or mother parent candidates, crossed things off the search list, made progress by learning that the person didn't have a will or a probate record or whatever that may be. So there are positive things about this. And another positive thing about not finding what you're looking for is that these negative results can often be turned into negative evidence. So look at what you didn't find and what does that negative finding or the absence of information about your person tell you about the person? Well, for one, it can tell you that sometimes it can tell you that they didn't live there at that time, like if it was a census. And sometimes it can tell you that they were not of the right age to be taxed, or it can tell you that they either didn't live there or didn't have a will at all. So there's different things that you can make it mean. And sometimes there's multiple pieces of negative evidence available. And when you combine it to the bigger picture, it will make more sense. So combining the negative results with the evidence from your timeline can often help. Now, sometimes we get a negative result, and there could be a reason that we're not finding what we're looking for. And perhaps the information is actually there, but due to one of these issues, we're not be able to see it right away, and we can dig deeper to find it. So, an example here is, could there be an indexing issue? I was searching in city directories this week, and I thought my ancestor should be there, and he didn't turn up when I searched the database, but when I looked page by page in the city directory, I found him, and the indexing was done probably by a machine and it was done really weird. And it included the name of their post office as a middle name and it got his middle initial wrong. So sometimes there's an indexing issue. And then another person that I was searching for in that same city directory was skipped altogether. So he just, as you scroll down, as you like hover over individuals on the ancestry page, you can see highlighting and then you can see the indexed people below. And as I highlighted over the person's name that I thought should have been there, his name was listed on the image, but it didn't have highlighting and he wasn't indexed. So that was just completely skipped. So just be careful of these indexing issues. And if you're relying on the database, maybe see if you can drill down a little more, look page by page, and do something different. Also, are we looking in the wrong place? Maybe we don't recognize that our people moved or that they got married in an adjacent county. We need to possibly widen the locations included in the search. And then maybe we're looking in a collection of wills, but actually our ancestor died intestate, so we need to look in administrations. Also, we're fans in the search strategy. Maybe if we get some negative results, we need to think about, okay, if my ancestor was not there, perhaps he died and his wife was living in the household of his brother. And so we actually need to look for tax records for the brother in order to find where this family was living. What additional records could you try? Has your research focused on online records? And is on-site research needed? So if we are only looking online, maybe we're missing something, we need to dig deeper. And that can be challenging, especially in a limited time frame like this. But when we realize we need on-site research is probably the time to go ahead and reach out to somebody on the Association of Professional Genealogists website and find somebody who lives near the repository we want to. I did that this week. I reached out to somebody in Texas. I found on APG, I looked at where all of the people who research in Texas lived and calculated how close they lived to the Texas State Library and Archives. And only one of them was close, 30 minutes away, contacted her. She's going to go do a lookup in tax records for me. So although sometimes it feels hard to do the on-site research, like me traveling to Texas would be much harder, but hiring someone is doable. All right, research plan flexibility. So we talked about what to do with your negative findings, how to write them up. We talked about how you could dig deeper with your negative findings. Maybe you missed something. And then if you really didn't miss anything and there's just nothing there in what you had in your research plan, then maybe we just need to be flexible. Following our plan takes a lot of discipline, which is good, but sometimes we can be frustrated because we don't find anything relevant with that plan. So just because we're following our plan and being disciplined doesn't mean that we can't be flexible too. And flexibility is an important part of research planning, especially when we find that we aren't getting the results we wanted. So here are some ideas to expand your research plan after you have had a lot of negative results. So one thing to do is to revisit your locality guide to see if there's more sources to search. And if your locality guide is sparse, maybe you need to beef it up and really dive deeper into what's available for your time and place. If you only looked at the family search catalog, you need to expand to look and see maybe there's deeds indexed at the county's website. Maybe there are tax records at the state level. What can we get from federal records? And so consider creating locality guides for all of the jurisdictions and not just the county. We talked about hiring researchers to visit the locality or view records not online. Create a new locality guide for another location. So expand out your location. If your people migrated, you might want to search another place in your timeline or just get the county next to you. Consider revising or broadening your research objective. And if you had a very focused research objective, it might not be answerable. And that might be why you're getting negative results. Maybe you need to broaden it to be a little less specific and a little bit more answerable. And only you can decide what that actually is for your question, since each question is so different. But I'll show an example in a minute. One thing to think about is, are you looking for direct evidence only? Because a lot of questions won't have any direct evidence, and that's why you're not able to find anything. So you need to evaluate your indirect evidence. Consider the clues that you already have in your starting point information and see what additional clues would help you get to a stronger conclusion. Reconsider your research plan and think about what evidence you need to create a stronger body of evidence to answer your question. Maybe you already have a hypothesis and you just need a little bit more to tie it together. maybe you haven't found anything and you need to go back to visit your known facts in your research plan and see what those are pointing to. I'm going to share an example of my second Research Like a Pro research project from RLP2. And I was a newbie at writing reports and making research plans. And I decided to work on my I don't know, fourth or fifth great grandmother, Sarah Rowden, who married Martin Schultz. And we had parents for her in our tree, but I wanted to find evidence to really show that that was true. I couldn't see anything in the tree that we had, and my mom hadn't really researched her specifically. And so we had just gotten it from trees, what we had. And we had that she was born in Virginia in 1796 and that her parents were Joseph Rowden and Susanna Adams. And Sarah married Martin Schultz on December 23rd, 1814 in Ray, Tennessee, and died in 1870 in Johnson County, Texas. And here is the 1850 census where she appears with two of her sons, inferred sons, but we have them as sons in our tree. The starting point information comes from the 1850 census that she was born in Virginia. We do have her marriage record right here. And we also have her 1850 census. And then she's mentioned in one of her son's deeds in Johnson County, Texas, where her son, William Schultz, was selling Sarah's interest to land formerly granted to her husband, Martin Schultz. So that's about it for the starting point. And let's see, I was trying to highlight her name, but I must have moved this, but there's her name, Sarah Schultz. And it says, I think it says widow, but then they crossed it off because by then she was deceased, I think. And this should say 1870. Got a typo there. So looking at the timeline, I noticed some things that I would do differently now. One is that I had a lot of derivatives, but I never added that to my research plan to get the originals. So although in my timeline I noted these were derivatives, I didn't do anything about that. In my timeline, I did include a lot more information about Sarah's family, like her parents, the births of her siblings, the taxation of her father, right here, which was a derivative, her husband's militia service, and I highlighted in pink anything that was directly about Sarah. And so I also noticed this biography of Martin Schultz, and it lists a different middle name for him than what I had on my tree originally. And this is an authored source, but when I looked at it, it had a lot of details in this biography that I didn't put in my timeline that were clues to a lot of migration for Martin and Sarah through Alabama and Missouri and Arkansas and all the way to Texas. So I think there were more locations I could have looked in. But basically, this research project did lead me to all negative search results. So evaluating it again and thinking about why and what I could have done differently, one of the main things I thought of is that I did not use the clues from my starting point information to guide the creation of my research plan. I just put this all in here and then quickly moved on to the research plan and said, I'm going to look for a will that's going to give me direct evidence of Sarah Rowden being the daughter of Joseph Rowden. So I think I should have worked more on building this information and evidence in original sources before going to the question, who were her parents? One of the things I could have done was to work on just who was Sarah Rowden, where did she and her husband live, and develop her identity and understanding that a lot more. So later down in my timeline, I did have some information about her grandfather, John Rowden, who mentioned his son Joseph Rowden in his will, and it actually shows that Sarah's supposed father was deceased by 1816. And so that was interesting to find out. And then I noticed I had never transcribed this will. So this would have been important information, might have had clues that I could use to tie Sarah to her parents' family. This is a will that mentions her supposed father, but I never took the time to transcribe it. So there were a lot of things that I would do differently now. And then at the very end, I never transcribed this deed either. So things that I could have added to my research plan but didn't. I also noticed that I didn't even list the 1830 and 1840 census for Sarah and Martin, even though it was attached to Martin's profile in our tree. So that would have helped too to develop additional residences for Sarah. And then I looked at my research project and I had some basic known facts here. but I didn't develop the citations very well. I did notice I had gaps about Sarah's husband's residences early in the marriage, which I think would have been important. Looking at where they got married in 1814 in Rhee or Ray, I'm not sure how to say Rhee, Tennessee. I could have looked for candidates in Rhee County, Tennessee that could have been her father. And that was not something I added to my plan. I did have some basic locality information, but it was very sparse. So I could have beefed that up. And then when I identified sources, I was really just focusing on probate because that's what I was really thinking I was going to find. And then when I made my research plan, I only had two items on it, and it was basically to search two or three collections in the same place for the will of one of these supposed parents, either Joseph or Susanna. So when I didn't find anything there, I wrote it up and said I didn't find anything. And I did find this one chancery cause for John Rowden, which is her supposed grandfather, and added that as kind of like a last ditch effort. Like, look, I did find something. And so I did have a lot of suggestions for future research, but they really focused on War of 1812 pension files. And these are actually not all available now. And there wasn't anything here for Martin, um, Martin Schultz or Joseph Rowden. Maybe I should check this Joseph Rowton. But I think I would do my research plan so much differently now. I would have really focused on identifying my person in original records first. And I think when you do that, it enables you to create a better research objective the next phase in order to move the research back to find the parents. So that's just one example. And depending on what your project was, it'll be different for you. But hopefully that was helpful to get some ideas of what we can do in the beginning stages of our research to help us have more success in the research planning. And um, so good luck on your research projects. And on the next phase, hopefully we can make research plans that help us to find the information we're looking for.